Okay, let's do this. Take two. Take two. I am re-upping this because there was a little issue. And it's so unpredictable, honestly, the when it freezes a frame of me like being like, huh? Because it's actually a frame taken before I go live, which is actually really probably pretty creepy. I'll be honest. Um, Before the camera has, or maybe it's not. Anyway, so here we are. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. And here let me share with you what we will be covering today. Hi. Let's see. Okay, the microphone's working. Okay, a little bit of a bumpy start, but here we are. Good morning. Welcome to Parinama Practice Space. And so the purpose of creating this space is together to build what becomes a consistent practice for uniting our nervous system, uniting our mental cognition, along with our emotion, feeling, and with our reflex, movement, and physicality. And when we unify all of those moving forward out of patterns, of historical patterns, then we have the chance to do something that is absolutely beyond comprehension. How do I know this? It is that when I started this process, I didn't even know to ask for what would become possible through doing it. The only things that I knew to want at the time had to do with things like, well, do I want, all this stuff that's socially programmed that has to do with, it's like more money, um, greater, things have to do with appearance and physical fitness, um, partners, like just like name the laundry list of the things that are sort of like the ascribed notions of like, okay, if you get more of this stuff, then, sort of your better career, yeah, like, and the list goes on, whatever it is. And the thing is that I had really done a lot of work in all of those areas. And I mean, I'm Katie Bickford. So I'm the author. And I created the Parinama method as an entity, and also, wrote the book and teach it, though it's certainly a collaboration between many people. I am just representing it. But when I originally started the process, I had already kind of traveled the world, lived all over, in Asia, Bali, India, massage school in Thailand, that whole thing. I built a bunch of organizations that were really highly, financially productive. I'd kind of, I did like a yoga practice that was really dedicated. Uh, like I had everything, like as far as what I thought, like this is what gets me there, and it didn't, and it was kind of like an impasse and a confusing point in my life. So the reason I bring this up is there's a lot about like, okay, this is the hardest work that I could ever propose for you to do, and anyone could, but since I'm kind of, since we're talking right now, I'll say me talking to you, and so the point of bringing this up is like, why would you do it? Why would you do it? It's hard. It's hard. What do you get out of it? And it's even in some ways harder to explain to the extent of how absolutely transformed life is in sort of a post-paranormal world. But we've got to get through some of these fundamentals and begin creating a consistent practice. Because with in the Parinamaverse, we view discipline as devotion. That devotion means showing up for the things that matter for you and matter to you in the best way that is available. And as a result of that, doing that as consistently as possible to the extent that is reasonable, and understanding there's ebbs and flows. We come and go. We have more energy for this type of work at different points and times in our life relative to the very real practical reality of our like, so-called like worldly commitments of, like physical survival and taking care of people that we love. But anyhow, that is my preamble for today because we are going to talk about the dilemmas as they relate to the adaptations and how we adapt. Now, before we start, I just want to check in because what we're going to do today is we're actually going to spend most of our time talking through the dilemmas and coming to understand what they represent and how they can help us uncover um, really important things about our process here with Parinama. But before we start, let's just start by taking a deep breath together. So inhale through the nose, like sniffing a flower. And then at the bottom, hold just for a couple counts. Maybe fill a little bit more. And then exhale out through the mouth. I didn't get that much out of that. So I want to do like stretch my neck a little bit. One more, inhale through the nose. And exhale through the mouth, like blowing out a candle. And let's just check in. Let's evaluate, our mental, emotional, and physical state, like separating these aspects and bringing our like special attention to each of them separately instead of the kind of like, oh, I just feel like it's like, okay, well, how do you feel mentally right now? And I would say mentally, um I'm pretty high. I'd say 7, 8 right now. I have a little bit of a headache. And one of the things I want to point out to this, it has to do with how much energy for me when I assess it that I have. It's like, and some of it has to do with like how good I feel, but it also has to do with how much energy I have for taking on tasks and relative to the sort of sub function of my being. So on that, I guess I'd probably give myself an 8 because I feel ready to take on a lot of stuff mentally today. Emotionally, it's like this is one of the things where it's like, how much do you have right now? And do you feel like you could really like, first of all, do you feel pretty good? And also, could you, if something happened right now, that sort of stressed your emotion system, it's kind of like, how would you do with that? And so, right now I'm kind of probably about an 8, 7, 8. Feels high, but it's like when I'm looking at it separately, it's a little bit like, it's a little lower than a sort of the cursory sort of notion of it. And then physically, I think probably same thing, 7, 8. So that's where we are today. So just walking through that, and once again, that is a really good exercise or just kind of practice to do with people in your life that you want to sort of quickly synchronize with, because it's like you can kind of, it can be helpful for, raising things, being like, yeah, well, this hurts, and like just creating awareness of the other person and just being interested also. But it's, starts from within. So we do it with ourselves first. So, okay. So today we're talking about adapting to early life. Now, how are we going to talk about this? Okay. Well, I'm going to go back to our little tangle that we have discussed, and I'm really looking forward to redoing this graphic because it is not really that great. So back to the tangle. So our nervous system being formed, so it's malleable. We're born with a developmental roadmap. Our nervous system is not fully, it like doesn't exist. It's just a lot of potential and future stages, and these stages map to all sorts of like different theories, faiths, world cultures, developmental psychology theories, Vedic philosophy, across the board, across time. But over time, we have stages of certain aspects of our nervous system that get developed. Now, early events and circumstances that growing nervous system is exposed to, we develop reflexes, adapt, and make the best of them. Those cognition starts to mature and develop. We attach belief systems to those reflexes, even though it is pretty much impossible to remember how they were formed. And that creates our sense of reality. That reality gets projected out into the world in a number of ways, and then the world responds accordingly to what we put out there. And then as a result of that, that tightens the notion of what we believe to be true, and it makes it feel like kind of our reflexes are completely like our complete truths about the only way to operate and react with the world. And so what we're doing here is we're teasing that out a little bit, and we're looking at the stage by stage. And for those who've been following along, this might be a little bit boring, and I'd love to hear feedback to about the extent of how boring this repetition is, because I feel like some of these concepts, it's hard for me to know because I had to learn them through a lot of rethinking them and learning different like facets of them, I guess you could say. So this repetition that I'm doing in perinomial might not be, you know, I don't know, appreciate or whatever. But just as a reminder, like these are the facets, these are the age we go through up until we're about 25. And in each of these, you can see there's kind of a very specific functionality that is baked into what it feels like to be alive every day. That is being sort of the foundation is being created. And one of the things is that there's kind of a stuckness that can happen with strictly cognitive therapy, that we can go story seeking. So it's like, what created this, in my early life, and a lot of stuff about parents, a lot of stuff about parents. And so with Parinama method, one of the things we're doing, and when we get into the dilemmas, we're going to talk a bit about this, is there is a role for holding people accountable, but the thing is the demonization or even the vilification of the people who shaped us. I mean, the thing is they were not aware, because most people are not aware, that minute actions that had to do with their mental state, their mental health, their level of availability, their level of literacy in a particular aspect, their ability to sync with you, like their level of of ability to create and respond each component of ourselves, it's a very short period of time. And also the thing is, people get shocked when they go back to their parents and they say, you did this thing to me, and the parent can't remember it. And that winds up becoming even kind of like creating a new layer of entrenchment around this stuff. And so yeah. So what we're doing here is that, yes, there are sort of some, architects that form these, but who they were to do it is, part like to really keep expanding them and their impact is to actually keep looking outward and versus inward, and understanding that whatever happened to us, we are now, whether this is just or unjust, ultimately responsible for the remediation and doing the shifts that change what it feels like to be alive. And there can be a whole discussion about how unfair or terrible that is, and I get it, but this is where we are. And I will tell you that one of the things about a really nice parinama practice is that these people, and especially the hold they have on us, it does start to evaporate and disintegrate and disappear and get contextualized relative to the rest of your life, believe it or not. Um, yeah, like the thing that they need to understand. It's like, nah, not really. But that's will come in a while. So, okay, let's talk about this tangle. Let's talk about the developmental stages, and let's talk about parinama and the methodology. So, what we're doing for each of these individual stages in parinama is we are doing like almost what I'd call like an audit of them, where we're coming to understand what is encompassed in that hub, or it's coming to learn. Like, so it's like, okay, security, trust, nourishment, safety. We learn, like, we go deep into those aspects of the hub. And then we come to understand the interruptions and stressors that can impact the development of that hub. And that was something we talked about last week, and we get into throughout the book in each hub chapter. But today and this week, we're talking about how we adapt. And so we adapt to our environment to make the best, respond with the internal resources we have, read the room, to try to figure out what is going to be the strategy that gets us the best result. Now, there is a lot of really good stuff in here in the book that has to do with getting into this. And let's see, for time, I don't know that we have a ton of time, but I'm going to read a little bit. And on page 30, if you're following along, each hub has its current level of strength or weakness coming from innate inclination, along with the age appropriate healthy development it received early in life. But there are also survival responses that affect a hub long-term, adaptations in response to stressors and interruptions, both shrinking and inflating. Under stress, the inflating response gets bigger and more demanding, while the shrinking response gets smaller and less demanding. And although these responses behave and appear to be very different, within a given hub, both adaptations differ in strategy but orbit around the same dilemma. For example, the third hub is personal power and individuality. So, on one end of the spectrum, in the overcompensating, inflating of dominance, authoritative behavior, and overconfidence that may appear powerful yet rely on having power over other people to feel strong. This means that without hierarchy, there is no personal power. It can only be felt relative to others, but not from within. And on the other end of the spectrum, the shrinking adaptation is more visibly lacking in confidence, feeling most comfortable in submission, and being protected by people it perceives to be powerful. Neither adaptation inhabits its own sovereign individuality and personal power. They both require external validation, but in different ways. A strong and developed third hub feels and emits personal power from within, along with deep ownership of worth and capability. So also under stress, adaptations tend to exaggerate. So after all, they're outcomes of stress. So if a shrinking adaptation is tired and hungry, it will tend to become extremely quiet. And an inflating adaptation will tend to complain and get louder. A couple with opposing adaptation patterns under mutual stress can experience exacerbated tension by how one or the other person responds. If a hub is underdeveloped or affected by interruptions, there can be fixation and obsession, often subconsciously generated, that overcorrect on one or more of the basics or themes of the hub. For a given hub, both shrinking and inflating adaptations are two sides of the same coin, reconciling the same dilemma using different strategies. However, once the dilemma is reconciled, the fixation recedes and the preoccupation is either reduced or eliminated. And I will add, one of the other things that happens is that the energy that was absorbed and used to manage and hold on to that fixation is now accessible and travels to typically more productive things like creativity and freedom and love. Or, it can travel into another fixation. But in my experience, regardless of whether that happens, there is a releasing and an accessing of greater energy. A lot of people tell me, like, oh my God, I'm like playing piano again. Oh my God, I'm writing. Oh my God, there's all this, I'm sort of getting access to all sorts of other stuff that I didn't have. So let's talk about it. These dilemmas. So one reason that we get into this, and we are like, as much as it's like, okay, you just said we're not going back and we're not like dwelling in the past, we're also but so what we are doing is we are seeking out these things that exist in our subconscious. So some of the exploration has to do with finding these aspects of ourselves and surfacing them to consciousness so that we can start working with them with techniques and exercises and management and understanding and contextualizing and all this kind of stuff that winds up being really wonderful. But let's get into it. So what we are going to do today is we're going to talk about what each of the dilemmas are. Now, if you want to read the full passage, there is the extended version that you will see here. For each of the hubs, there's a little blurb that you can get into for the dilemma. But what we're going to talk about here is this prompt. And this is the prompt for exploration and to look at this and understand, to evaluate, do I have interruption in this hub? And is this worth evaluation? Is this worth, yeah, and so it's just doing a little bit of a back of the envelope calculation to be like, okay, where is this? And so for the purposes of today, not having a ton of time left over, I am going to go through these dilemmas with you and we are going to talk it out. So the dilemmas. So ask yourself now. So first hub is infant. It's physical security. It's trust. It's the responsiveness of the physical world. So a lot of this is just really about how established we were in our relative safety, physical safety, very specifically physical safety here. So now in your life, this is where we're testing for the lasting implications of the formation um, of this hub, and we're asking ourselves, just in my physical safety. Ask yourself, and this is a prompt. And so I would encourage, if this is like evocative, is to spend a little time journaling. If you have getting into the associated chapter, this would be chapter 4, specifically the techniques and exercises, especially if this is activating, which it really can be. And what I would counter this with is that I used to believe that that was just how it is, that you don't feel safe because the world is uncertain. But the thing is, the world is uncertain, but in the day-to-day feeling within your body, what it feels like to be alive, like you can actually feel safe within yourself while also being aware that externally you have to be, um, maintain some alertness and awareness. And so let's keep going. So the baby, thinking about a baby, goo goo gaga, being cute, smiling, snuggling, being cute. And this is where to become interested in sensory. So this stage of development is eating and some movement and, and attuning. So it's like, okay, are my signals that I'm responded to, like, so do I sync with my environment? So when I cry a certain way, their parents really figure out it's like, oh, he cries this way, she's hungry. Or when he, fusses this way, it means he wants, to be swaddled tighter. And this kind of like emotional attunement that really develops the sense that it's like the feelings that I have make sense in the world. And as a result of that, you're really establishing your own like emotional library and understanding and trust in your feelings. So this is a very deep phenomenon, which is that when I feel something and I express it, it actually makes sense, versus when I feel something and I express something, it makes no sense to anyone. And the deeper, like one of the prompt that we're looking at here for evaluating the dilemma is, can I allow myself to want what I want? Can I allow myself to want what I want? So am I adopting like what I want to being pleasing to other people or being socialized to want the kinds of things that I'm supposed to want? Am I more concerned that other people, it's like if you're ordering food, and more, are you more concerned that other people are going to get what they want and enjoy the meal, disproportionate to your enjoyment? When you buy things, are they for your pleasure, or are they, serving to kind of please and placate others with things that have to do with your appearance? I mean, the list goes on. And also you can certainly read more if you're following along in the book. Now, the next dilemma is, this is the toddler, and the toddler is a really good example of the terrible twos, where you're at the development of personal power. And also, for me, particularly fascinating is the vilification of this stage in a child. For practical reasons, it's really difficult to raise a child at this stage because they are exercising their individuality, and they're becoming, and because of that, there is selfishness that can be uncharming. And so it's, kind of creating some boundary and fencing that in. But the thing is like what's being developed in that stage is how powerful can I be without for others uncomfortable. That's the manifestation of it now as an adult. It's like, am I fearing punishment? Am I fearing retribution? Am I like, how powerful can I actually be without feeling like I'm being threatening to other people? Now, zippity dippity do through the remaining, but hopefully they'll be evocative and supportive of just some introspection and some prompts here. So last but not least on this page, and then we're going to do the remaining three quickly, is how much of myself do I need to hide to belong? And this is to do with early childhood. And if you can, we'll go into this in the book, is that one of the things about belonging, and so very specifically socialized belonging outside of the home, fourth hub is where we're expanding out into the world. It's like a kind of a connection. Um, it's the connections we have that, and we're building off of the foundation of the connections we have with our caregivers. But if you can remember, I mean, people will say, really idealize, early childhood, everything was so simple. But if you think back, it wasn't really so simple. There's a lot of coding for belonging. There's a lot of, personalities that were dominating. And it was confusing for a kid that was just sort of like coming out of the little, world of their home. And things like, are you wearing the right stuff? Are you hanging out with the right people? Are you acting the right way? And a lot of this stuff like was the downside of getting it wrong was exclusion or embarrassment, or also, that like, so there's a lot. It's a really heavy time, actually, I think, for children. And because of where it exists in the developmental roadmap and our ability to recall it with episodic memory, it kind of gets washed out as pretty idyllic. But there's a lot that's happening in that, and we'll get into it. We will get into it. You just wait. So the remaining dilemmas, and we're just going to zip through them. I'm just going to read them. Is for late childhood, and this is the fifth hub. The corresponds with the so-called the throat chakra. Is how much of my truth can I speak without or putting myself at risk? This is a lot to do with speaking. This is at the age where we still don't really understand the social rules. We're learning what they are. And we can get shocked when we say something that's naturally arising that is, a social mores. And so when people talk about having public, the tense response that we get physically about public speaking, thinking back to, maybe some of our first experiences of really speaking up and speaking out, we stumbled upon pointing out truths that were not supposed to be mentioned, and as a result of that, suffered the consequences that we carry within us with subconsciously. Now adolescence is, what will I allow myself to see? And then early adulthood is, can I change my mind? These are pretty big ones, pretty heavy ones, but they come a lot later, and they work a lot better when we have the earlier foundations worked through. So what we can see works out a lot better, allowing ourselves to see things that we've sort of protected ourselves from when we have our sense of security, when we have greater emotional capacity, when we feel autonomous in our personal power, and when we understand that love is actually not something that we need to rely as externally sourced, that it's actually originating from within us, and it's a joy to share it with other people. So that is it for today. Apologies for the technical difficulties. Yeah, it's just one of those things that happens, right? But anyway, so that's it for today. Tomorrow we will talk about the shadows in a particular way. We've already talked about the shadows, but when we're talking about interruptions, stressors, and this week as adaptations, and how the shadow aspects of ourselves can become maladapted, then it's a separate thing. So um, if you want to see more, it's theparinamamethod.com. If you want to learn more about the book, find out where you can get it, that kind of stuff, and even a bit more just of an overarching notion of what parinama is, take a peek over there. And also on this channel, subscribe. There are a lot of videos at this point, and I've read the book cover to cover in the lives with page numbers mentioned. Coming soon will be some more produced videos, hooray, that will actually, hopefully be like present a little bit more of a polished version of what we're doing here in the practice space. But as we stand, we are doing this together, developing a consistent practice. And for that, I am grateful for you. See you soon. Bye.